And moving ahead, everyone, we have our next speaker on board, Mr. Naresh Khanna, editor, Indian printer and publisher. Mr. Naresh Khanna, educated in the US in modern philosophy, computer programming, and offset printing. Activist against Vietnam War and racial segregation. Since 1975, worked in India as a printer and consultant to publishers, printers, and global organizations. Involved in the computerized implementation of Indian scripts for typesetting. Author, Miracle of Democracy in India, Interprint 1977. Founded magazines, Indian printer and publisher in 1979 and packaging South Asia in 2007. Trained in flexo plate making at Point, Malaysia. Trained and certified G7 expert in 2016 in Mumbai. Consultant and principal researcher of the Indian print, publishing, and packaging industry, including consumables, since 1999 at IPP Star. He's going to share great insights on the future of the Indian printing, packaging, and paper industries, learnings from the two pandemic years and the current situation. Please welcome him on the dais, everyone. Please give a huge round of applause for him.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah? We have a very small audience, and I think rather than bore everyone to tears, I will try and do this thing quickly. It's 12:05, so that we can get some inputs from the audience also. Okay? Basically, um, I assume that we are all in either the printing industry, the packaging industry, or the publishing industry, or the paper industry. Okay? And in our country, we have come through 2 years and 2 months, let's say about 25 or 26 months of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I believe this has been traumatic in different ways, and that we need, as one of the parts of the economy which I think is more resilient than other parts, I think we need to help the economy move forward and come back to recovery. So I will go quickly through this whole thing so that maybe we can have a little bit of discussion. Okay? This is only about our group. Okay? Not very interesting. We started as a technical newsletter. We developed research in 1999. And we now have 4 or 5 web platforms, etc., which are mainly B2B platforms. But the whole thing is that we saw that we could not enter the 20th century without, in India, there should be some research on the ground for our industry, publishing, printing, and packaging. We should have some real numbers. And that was why we set up IPP Star, and also for purposes of training and consultancy and conferences. Now, what have we learned in the last 2 years of the pandemic? I think what we have learned broadly is that we were rushing forward before the pandemic in a globalized world. And to some extent, the globalization has broken down. And the supply chains have broken down. If you order a machine today, it will cost you 15 to 20% more. If it's a printing machine or a packaging machine, it will cost you 15 to 20% more than it would have cost you 2 years ago. And the supply will not be next month or the month after that. It will be a minimum of 8 months. Okay? So there is a disruption in the globalization. Okay? Similarly, the fact that there are 6,000 or 7,000 ships in Shanghai harbor stuck, containers are stuck, which means that even if you have newsprint, like there are some major newspapers, while the prevailing price of newsprint in India to Indians is about $1,000 a ton, or 1,050 a ton, there are some newspapers who have bought $650 a ton, but they don't know when that newsprint will reach them because there are no ships and there are no containers. Okay? So there is a disruption in the supply chain, in the globalized supply chain. And whether you like it or not, the present government's Atmanirbhar movement, self-sufficiency, it gains a different character and importance now, where you have to start making more of your own raw materials and making more of your ancillary equipment in order to move the industry forward, in order to meet demand. Okay? So we are part of this global thing, and we are connected. We are still connected. We are connected thanks to the cloud. The cloud was a big benefit. Digital was a big benefit. Okay? Digital is not the enemy of paper or print or packaging. Okay? Digital works well with packaging, and digital works well with paper. But they have to be married. They have to be continued. Yeah. So the country as a whole is resilient. Okay? I would say that there was never a shortage of food on our shelves. Our stock markets did very well, totally digital. Our agriculture did okay. Our health industry delivered. Our medical industry delivered vaccine. We are the largest producer of vaccine in the world. All these are facts. Okay? So this is what makes our country resilient. Plus the fact that it's a big country and a big economy. Okay? And that we are able to work and subsist at a very low level of inputs. We need very little water, very little paper, very little electricity, very little money in order to survive. Okay? So we're a subsistence economy, but a resilient economy. And as you know, the packaging industry, of course, was considered an essential industry during the pandemic. Some packaging companies didn't even close down for one day. Okay? So they have done very well. Also, what happened before the pandemic, that because flexible packaging in India is booming and continues to boom, flexible packaging, there is a huge number of flexible film lines on order. About 14 film lines are on order, each of them which will produce 40 to 50,000 tons of film for packaging. So it's not like the flexible packaging industry or the plastics industry is listening to the government. Okay? They have not sorted out the issue. They are going ahead and making large investments because they know that flexible packaging is still extremely efficient and extremely cost effective. And this is a huge challenge for the carton printers, for the paper industry, that it has to take on. Okay? And it's also an opportunity in sense. Okay? So to a large extent, the economy has been determined by cost. Demand has been determined by costs, not by needs. That means we need to be environmentally friendly, but we are determined by the demand of the brand owners who want to have cheap packaging. I'd like to say that, the future, just as the previous speaker said, the future is never certain or guaranteed. If you are a printer, it doesn't mean that you will continue to be a printer or a successful printer unless you adapt or change or evolve. There is no guarantee. Okay? This is the part of risk that goes with being in business. So we have to, as an industry, whether we are publishers, we are printers, or we are packaging companies, converters, we have to learn to transform the needs of the society into demand. I say this because in the 1950s, the Indian Institute of Management produced a book on the demand for paper in India, and naturally assumed that an independent country will start to educate its children and there will be huge demand for paper. But there wasn't. There was a need for education, but there was no demand for paper. There was no demand for books. There was no demand for schools. You understand? There is a difference between needs and demands. And that is the bridge that we have to create as an industry to turn needs into demands. You know that now, with the digital world, there are 400 million Indians who don't need print, who seem to not need paper. They are communicating with their village sitting in the city. Their children are going to school. Sometimes their children are even being taught using a cell phone. Okay? There are 400 million people who are poor, who are in those kind of jobs, which they don't need to be even highly literate. But the issue is the other 1 billion is also a huge market. That other 1 billion is a huge aspirational market that wants to create disposable income and wants to have cars, houses, better education, travel, foreign education, etc., etc. Just as a point, I must tell you that Indians spend more on foreign education of their children. We spend something like 100,000 crores to send our children abroad to colleges and universities, when the Indian government spends only 50,000 crores on higher education. So this is an issue of need and demand, which became very clear when we were bringing back doctors from the Ukraine. Okay, it's obvious that we need to create jobs for doctors in India. We need to create rich, good jobs for doctors in India, which include research opportunities, like anywhere else in the world, not just to make money, but to be doctors and researchers. And also we need to create the educational and research institutions. So that's where the demand and need have to be matched. Print is essential for democracy. There's no way to get away from it. Print is essential for creativity. There's no way to get away from it. And without creativity, you will not have adaptation, you will not have anything. You will not have science, you will not have any kind of evolution of the society and of turning actual needs into demand. So print is an essential tool for all these things. Print and paper in India are still growing. In spite of the cloud, in spite of digital, they are still growing and they have headroom. And as I said earlier, India is relatively an efficient user of paper. We make paper without Arctic fiber. We make paper out of very ordinary kind of trees which are grown in plantations. But it is proven that we can make good paper out of these. And of course, it needs to improve. Also, what I said earlier to the gentleman from TNPL, the global system is not working anymore. And the global distribution, the logistics, the cost, the prices are not working anymore for India. For Indian newspapers, for Indian book publishers, for Indian printers, it is very difficult. On the other hand, we are producing paper and print which can be exported and is successfully being exported. Also, we are producing packaging which is being exported. Now, I will go to a slide a little bit ahead. This is essentially a pyramid which shows that the highest priced papers are on top, but the increasing volume and demand for paper is on the bottom. The most demand is for packaging paper, for building and construction, for food service papers like you see now. You know that every day there is a new McDonald's or a new KFC or a new Domino's opening up in India. Okay, and that's not going to stop. It's in fact, if you read the papers today, you will see many businesses that started as online businesses are now opening up boutique shops. They're opening up offline businesses as the pandemic ends. So this inexorable growth of the economy will not stop. Okay? And it goes on to different kinds of paper. You see that the printing and publishing papers are in the middle. And today my main argument is that this is where in India we need to produce more publication papers and more writing and printing papers, and more newsprint. I'll go back to the earlier slide. So basically, packaging papers are at a premium. As you know, in the last 5 or 10 years, new machines have come to Bhadrachalam, ITC Bhadrachalam for FBB or SBS board. Century has set up a new paper machine. Imami has set up a machine. JK has set up a machine. JK is setting up another machine. And also that during the pandemic, because of e-commerce, a lot of the ordinary mills shifted to liner for corrugated board. Indian mills were able to even export liner to China because of the demand for corrugated. And also, even the worst quality paper mills in India say that without exports, we cannot be viable or succeed. So even the liner mills, recycled, brown, unbleached liner for corrugation, that also needs to improve in quality to be exportable and to be viable. And because the customers now are also customers who are of a global standard, customers like Amazon, customers like IKEA, these are not the same customers where you could pass off very lousy kind of corrugation to work. You have to improve the quality of corrugation, which means better adhesive, better water, better liner, etc. So packaging papers are at a premium, and that's where the paper mills are investing. My argument is that there are other paper mills which are underperforming, which are either sick or, for instance, Balarpur's mill, Sinarmas. What is it doing? This was a great Indonesian mill. The Indonesians brought in the pulp. They set up a whole system for making very high quality paper. But the Thapar family or the company has basically bankrupted that mill, but it needs to be revived. It needs to be seen that paper is a public good. Newspapers are a public good. Education is a public good. This is something where the government must, if necessary, intervene in a positive way to revive this mill. Already, governments of Maharashtra have twice taken bribes to open that mill. Okay, when the government changed, the bribe had to be given all over again. But the problem is that this is a fantastic machine, set of machines to make high quality paper, and it is an asset belonging to the Indian people. We have paid for that. We have absorbed the losses for that, and the mill needs to be revived. There are other mills also which need to be revived, but essentially, the quality of paper has to improve. If you see the news in the last few days of Voith, for instance, upgrading various, there's a mill in South India which is investing in Voith pulping to improve the quality of the pulp for corrugation. So the Indian paper makers get it. They are improving the quality of their paper. Okay? And they need to make a huge variety of papers that are going to be needed in the future. So, as I have said, Indian paper makers are among the finest paper makers in the world. They are not only paper makers, but they are very good creators of fiber on very ordinary land, on land which can be monitored, which can be tracked and traced, and where in the future, if you export packaging or if you export paper, you will have to show the source of the fiber. It's inescapable in a modern world where sustainability is a key issue, and that the buyer of the packaging, the buyer of the product, the buyer of the paper wants to know, where did this come from? Where did this fiber originate? In which land? And there are paper mills in India who have a chip which is embedded in their timber supplier, their fiber supplier's phone, in the middle of their farm, in the middle of their land, so that the entire tracking and tracing of the origin of the fiber to the pulping stations, to the paper machine, to the packaging, the cutting of the pulp reel, and the packaging of the paper is all digitally marked and digitally tracked and traceable. So you can actually pay a paper mill 0.5% more or 1% more for the paper and get the entire history of where that paper comes from. And this is essential because if you export, for instance, to Europe, you are bound by what is called the EUTR, the European Union Timber Regulations. It's not possible to export even a handicraft from India in packaging without paying attention to the EUTR. I know because I have been involved on the behalf of foreign importers from India who had to insist that the paper for the packaging comes from EUTR certified paper mills.